Next on Basic Black.
We would draw 40,000. The Dodgers were drawing 20. After Jackie Robinson went to the Brooklyn Dodgers, the stands started filling up again because Jackie was stealing everything but the umpire.
Honoring the legacy of African Americans on the baseball field. That's coming up next on Basic Black.
No, I never did think I would ever become a part of American history, but and I never did think that I would even play Major League Baseball.
I went up like that, and boy, when that ball came up, I was ready for it. And when it came up, and I knew I was going to get a good swing, I'd raise this foot up, because when I swing, my weight going forward, because I didn't have the weight.
Oh, I'm the only woman that ever pitched in the major leagues, and I'm proud of that. And it made me somebody, so I'm happy about that.
There was a desire of black folk in the teens and 20s to see images of themselves, and the crowds came out in droves for these Negro League games.
For blacks then, it was the color of their skin, not their talent or effort, that kept them off fields like Fenway Park here in Boston. And it remained that way until 1947, when Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby broke the color line in modern-day Major League Baseball. It took even longer for the Red Sox to catch on. They were the last team to integrate. But there would never have been a Jackie Robinson, a Willie Mays, or a Hank Aaron if not for the leagues that Black America created on its own.
The reasons why the Negro League reform were complex. Jim Crow was really just being fully put into place in the early 20th century. In the late 19th century, there were black players on the college teams in baseball at places like Oberlin, Harvard, Amherst, Syracuse, and Boston University. But things began to tighten up in the first decade of the 20th century. So exclusion was a factor, particularly for teams traveling in the Jim Crow states and in the border states. You had the problem of where are they going to eat, where are they going to stay, and they usually ended up staying in rooming houses, so-called colored rooming houses.
Tonight, we begin with Charlie Lloyd, a man who played his heart out right here in New England. Lloyd was with the Highland Colored Giants.
I saved my money and bought my first glove, baseball glove. I was a happy somebody, you think I would say. You thought I was a millionaire, but I would have nobody near it, you know. Well, that's the way things were when we were coming up. We didn't have much, but what you had, you know what I mean, you liked it.
Baseball was originally a gentleman's game. After the Civil War, interest in baseball soared. Americans of all classes, creeds, and races joined in the game that became America's national pastime.
It was my favorite. I loved the game so much. When I left the house in the morning by 8 o'clock, I wouldn't come back no more until about 5:30 in the afternoon. And I would get a nice whipping because I didn't come back to eat in the afternoon. The hell with the food, I didn't care about food. Neither did the other boys, we'd rather play than that. You don't find many kids like that today. You know what I mean? That's how good we loved the game.
But when 91-year-old Charlie Lloyd played the game, baseball had already been racially divided for more than half a century. In 1868, the National Association of Baseball Players voted to bar any club with a colored player. Professional ball began the next year, and slowly, blacks were left out. Blacks continued to play, but on all-black teams. This led to Rube Foster organizing the very first Negro Leagues. Almost a century later, the legacy of black baseball lives on. The Negro Leagues Baseball Museum travels around the country celebrating a chapter in America's past.
I've heard of them. That was one of the best black teams here, the Hilldale. They were one of the best. 1959, wow.
Charlie Lloyd played ball himself, but he loved to watch the great ones play.
Hall of Fame, wow. I never knew these guys up there. I want to see.
When the exhibit arrived in Boston, he felt like a kid all over again.
Here's the one right here. He was a big boy. Old Satchel. One night in Philadelphia, there are 2 more outs to go. He called in the outfield, told him to come on in. They didn't need him. And there was still 2 outs to go. Him pitching, struck the other 2 guys out. This is a night game in Philly. I happened to be there.
Satchel Paige was considered one of the hardest throwing pitchers ever.
They had a lot of Satchel Paiges out there. Men could throw the ball hard as me. We had men about 100 could have made the big league, for that's concerned. About 100, not about a full 2s or 3s.
He played for many Negro League teams, including the Birmingham Black Barons and the Kansas City Monarchs. Although baseball integrated way after his prime, he was 42 when he played for the Cleveland Indians. Paige became the first black pitcher in the American League and baseball's oldest rookie. Did you know that you were watching great players?
I'm sure at that time, sure.
What were you thinking?
But we couldn't get in the, we knew there was no chance of getting in the big leagues, the white leagues.
Josh Gibson, another big name, was called the Black Babe Ruth because of his awesome power at the plate. He hit more home runs than Babe, and many said the ball traveled a much greater distance. Gibson died at 36. He never played in the majors.
People ask me, did I carry any chip on my shoulder because I couldn't, because we were barred from going there? And I told them no, because it's a way of life. You never know what's going to happen. You accept the thing that you can't do anything about. We knew we couldn't get in there, but we went on and played and did our best, like the other black teams all over.
New Englanders had to travel, as Charlie Lloyd did, to see the likes of Josh Gibson and pitching sensation Satchel Paige. But the black teams that did exist formed a semi-pro league and played amongst themselves and played against whites.
They tried to beat us, but we beat them. The idea was this: get in there and you win that first game. Once you beat them, they are hungry now. They want you to come back to play them so they can get even. And let me tell you this, when you went back, you didn't play the same people that you played before. They had ringers from other clubs, just like Tops, all around. So that's what we had to put up with. They would always build it like this. The colored giants are going to play a certain team. When you saw that, that was a drawing card, and the people turn out. We were up in Augusta, Maine one Sunday afternoon, and this kid came over. I guess he was around about 9 years old. And he said, "Could I have your autograph?" I said, "Sure." So he gave it to me, and I signed it and gave it back to him, and he thanked me. He said, "Mister, you know one thing? My mother told me she was going to bring me to see the game because I was going to see the colored giants." And he looked at me and he says, "You're one of the giants?" I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I don't know." He says, "You know one thing? My father is taller than you."
People wanted to see a different brand of baseball. That's why they started buying up the contracts of the players in the Negro League. We invented the drag bunt. We invented the double steal. We invented the stealing home. An exciting baseball. That's what people wanted to see.
Those guys could bunt and run. Oh, I mean, it was a pleasure to see him. That's what really pepped up that game. And as I say, when a man got on first base, and everybody couldn't drag bunt. But if a drag bunter was up there, boy, he'd make that pitcher look like a fool.
What?
He'd get up there and drag that ball right on down, and he'd be running like a. But you see, you got to drag it so that you can make the pitcher come off that mound, go this way. So you keep running. So he's got to go and field the ball, and when he got to turn around, right hand, and then throw it. By that time, you're on first base.
This was some of the best baseball ever. Teams like the Pittsburgh Crawfords, the Homestead Grays, and the Kansas City Monarchs played a fast-paced game. The Negro Leagues even had their own World Series and an All-Star game that was probably the biggest black sports event in the country. And in the stands, African-American fans dressed for the show. Men wore ties and hats, and ladies came to the ballpark in dresses and pearls. Stadium seats never looked so good. And when games fell on a Sunday, black churches held services early just so everyone could make the game. It was a time for black folks to enjoy their own national pastime. It was a joy for the fans and the ball players too. Despite the bigotry and hatred, the Negro Leagues flourished. Some of these same black Americans who battled on the baseball diamond also had to fight for their country overseas. They gave their lives to a nation that considered them second-class citizens. These men were good enough to die, but not good enough to play baseball? In 1945, Brooklyn Dodgers president Branch Rickey saw the writing on the wall. Blacks playing in the major leagues would be good for the game and for the country. So he signed Jackie Robinson, who played in the farm system until 1947. During the 47 season, Robinson made an immediate impact, winning Rookie of the Year.
I had to give him an actual picture, by voice, by gesture, but by every means I had, to have him realize what he was in front of and what he was about to agree to.
My main ambition was to get along well enough with whoever I was playing with so that they would realize that there wasn't any friction because I was colored and they were white. I mean, we could play together. I think that was my main ambition, was to break down that barrier, not so much for me to go to the major leagues. I just wanted somebody to go. I didn't care who it was.
Robinson was just one shining star from the Negro Leagues. There were many more. White baseball knew integration was inevitable and that it would mean good business.
Branch Rickey had sense enough to see this. Let me tell you, we would be playing in the Polo Grounds, and we would draw 40,000. The Dodgers would be playing at Dodger Stadium in Brooklyn, and they was drawing 20. So Branch Rickey saw this, and he had the good sense to sign Jackie Robinson. After Jackie Robinson went to the Brooklyn Dodgers, the stands started filling up again, because Jackie was stealing everything but the umpire.
After Robinson broke the color line, other great black baseball players were signed. Players like Satchel Paige, Monty Irvin, Roy Campanella, Willie Mays, and Hank Aaron eventually left the Negro Leagues for the majors. But black baseball still had a following. For blacks who wanted to try at the big time, the Negro Leagues could still be a way in. Kansas City Monarch pitcher Henry Mason.
When I first put a uniform on for the Kansas City Monarchs, it was one of the happiest days in my life. And when Buck O'Neill let me pitch, oh man, I thought I was in heaven. And I had good stuff, and I did well that day. I did real well. I don't know how many strikeouts, but the day that I was telling you about, opening day in 1954, I pitched 16 innings and we beat the Philadelphia Stars 3-2.
Because the blacks hadn't broken the color barrier at that time.
Yeah.
What was the audience participation?
Let me tell you, in 1954, I pitched an opening day game in Kansas City. There was 17,000 36 at opening day in Kansas City. In St. Louis, where the Cardinals and Cincinnati was playing, there was only 4,000.
The attraction was that you had growing urban black populations in cities like Chicago and Kansas City and other places where the teams played, even if they weren't necessarily based there. And so, you know, this was at the tail end of the Great Migration of the World War I era and after. And it dropped off a little bit during the Depression, black migration to cities, but when the cranking up of the economy for World War II came, the migration reached an all-time peak during the 1940s. You know, it was large concentrations of black population that were working in factories and shipyards and had money to spend on amusement, and they turned out, as well as, you know, white fans of baseball recognizing quality baseball when they saw it, even if it was across the color line.
Negro baseball crossed the gender line as well. Toni Stone was the first of 3 women to play in the Negro Leagues. Joining Stone later was pitcher Mamie Peanut Johnson. They called her Peanut because of her size.
Because I learned to play baseball in South Carolina when we were making our own baseballs then. And I was very, very young. And I got to love the game. And the more I played, the better I got, the more I wanted to play. And I say when I was about 17, I went to try out for the All-Whites League, Women's League, and I was rejected. But I'm glad that they rejected me because I would be just another woman ball player.
These days, Mamie spends some of her time coaching women's baseball in the Washington, D.C. area.
Take your time, baby. Take your time. Take your time. Take your time. Women been doing everything men been doing for years. And if just given the chance to do, they'll be able to do. Playing baseball was something I always wanted to do. And to get a chance to play in the major leagues, that was the greatest thing in my life. And that was a great impact on me. And it showed me and it made me know that anything that you put your mind to, you can do. And that was my dream.
I think the black people made a big contribution to the game of playing baseball, because I tell you, for the simple reason, they tried harder to play it, and they tried harder to beat them because they knew they was going to be playing white teams, and you would try like the devil to beat them so that they would invite you back again and you get a chance of making more money.
I tell you, I think baseball was good for me, especially Buck O'Neil. Buck O'Neil helped me grow into a man that I am now.
John Buck O'Neil was Henry Mason's manager. He had many great years managing and playing. O'Neil was the first baseman when the Kansas City Monarchs won 4 consecutive Negro League pennants.
You know, when a kid gets away from home at 21 or 22 and leave his parents and he's out there on his own, you know, he have a tendency to might do some things that wouldn't be pleasing in the parents' eyes. So Buck came and took me under his wings, and when I do something wrong or stay out too late at night, he says, "What do you want to be, a street runner or a ball player?" So this really helped me out. Maybe if it hadn't been for Buck, I'd probably be sleeping under the bridge today. I don't know.
Although O'Neil never made it to the major leagues himself, he is responsible for helping other African Americans get there. O'Neil was a scout before becoming the first black coach in Major League Baseball. He's now the board chairman of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum in Kansas City.
These people that you're looking at, they were the forerunners. They are the ones that actually preceded you in whatever job you have now. They paved the way for you. Whatever thing you're doing now, they paved the way for you. Remember that.
A few years after the color barrier was broken in baseball, the Negro Leagues packed it in. The great players signed where they could get more money. But the legacy left by the men and women who played black baseball will be felt forever. Negro Leaguers are now in the Hall of Fame, and more are expected to be added. These men and women showed America they could perform with competence and grace in spite of what was before them. The players of today owe Jackie Robinson and the Negro Leagues a debt of gratitude.
One of the greatest thrills of my life was being at Fenway Park in July 1999. I was there for the baseball All-Star game, and I witnessed all of America celebrating the fact that Jackie Robinson, number 42, had integrated the sport nearly 50 years ago. It was a great occasion to celebrate the great diversity of baseball and the many accomplishments that followed Jackie Robinson's breaking the color line. As I sat there that night and looked at Willie Mays, Bob Gibson, and Hank Aaron and others, I was overcome with emotion to see how much we'd contributed to the sport of baseball. And yet I was pained. I was troubled, because I also remembered that baseball less than a century ago didn't reflect the great diversity and the great accomplishments and the great talents of African American athletes. I reflected on the fact that people like Satchel Paige and Cool Papa Bell and others had the talent, the commitment, and yet they didn't have the opportunity to play in baseball. It was because of their color. Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, and now we have to make sure that we never go back to that stage again. Now we have to make sure that America reflects the great diversity in baseball, the great diversity in all of our sports. Those brothers back then played on cornfields and backyards, on open lots, any place they could find. They didn't complain, they weren't spiteful, they weren't hateful, and yet America didn't accept them. Now we have a chance to look at the great baseball accomplishments of the 21st century, to see that so many African Americans and others are playing today, but also to thank those who labored in the vineyards, who fought valiantly to show that they had the talent and the commitment, even though they didn't have the opportunity. Baseball should never go back to the 20th century. Baseball should never be a sport that doesn't reflect the diversity of our nation. It should be America's favorite pastime, and those who participate should look like America. That's the challenge for baseball in the 21st century. We can make it happen, and we will.
For questions and comments, please visit our website at www.wgbh.org.